my predecessor, the ambassador, is an academician, so he was able to speak without a prepared note, but I have one, and I hope I'll be able not just to stick to this, but be able, like him, to look around. Good afternoon once again, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak at this occasion. I regard this as a very important theme, what you are covering over the 2 days. And this is also relevant in my daily work as an ambassador. Ambassador from Malawi, and that is the part of Africa. Of course, when you look at different foreign policies, we see terms like energy diplomacy, terms like climate diplomacy, but I believe fundamental to all these is the diplomacy, the cultural diplomacy. And I say why. You know better than me that culture often refers to the beliefs that people hold about the reality, and some of the questions that were coming here were referring to those realities. Culture often refers to the norms that guide their behavior, the values that orient their moral commitment, and of course, culture refers to how all this is communicated. And this has a profound influence on the world of politics, more so today. When, for instance, COVID-19 has taught us that the world is without borders. Climate change is teaching us that the world is without borders. When a war in one continent can affect the world supply chain, that shows what all this is all about. When nations are experiencing gaps in their skilled labor, when the social media is making our world a global village when it comes to information, whether real or fake, this shows that all this is influencing world politics. And cultural diplomacy, as you know, is an exchange of these ideas, information, art, and other aspects among nations and peoples in order to foster mutual understanding, whether they're engaging in energy discussions or climate discussions. But one thing we have to know, because there are times when we have a misunderstanding, diplomacy does not mean not telling the truth or being dishonest, but rather telling the truth in an provoking way, choosing the right words, knowing when to say what. It means exchange of ideas, information that is honest and not time-wasting. When I came to take my position here in Berlin as an ambassador in November 2021, I was full of energy. I still remember moving from conference to conference, meetings to meetings of the groupings of Southern African ambassadors, African ambassadors, to the ministries, different ministries here. But I have slowed down. Why? I leave it to your imagination. Anyway, I have slowed down in some cases because there's much talk and talk and talk and talk and little action. And being Malawi from Africa, I've heard, even from my fellow ambassadors from Africa, and especially people in different conferences saying Africa has the potential. I have to say, and diplomatically, that I'm fed up with hearing these words that Africa has the potential, because people knew already that Africa had the potential for decades long. That's why Africa was partitioned, because they knew that there was potential there. Time now is time to talk of opportunities and how to work on those opportunities. So as you already know, students in this field of cultural diplomacy, you know it covers quite a lot, but this afternoon I want to focus on the role of cultural diplomacy in solving the global dangers inequality. As students, definitely you have read so many documents, including the UN 75 report, Shaping Our Future Together. And there you have lots and lots of statistics. You have seen so many documents that are talking of the inequalities that are there in the world. But I want to share with you what I go through as an ambassador in my daily work in relation to the cultural diplomacy, and ask what triggers questions of inequality. I will share with you a little bit about Malawi as a country, because I can't be talking of other countries before talking of Malawi. And I will also share with you issues on the continental level, the continent of Africa, the continent I call home. So to begin with, let me give you a quick picture of Malawi. My colleague, the ambassador, knows Malawi because he has already told me some of the places he went to, because he was ambassador in Tanzania covering Malawi. In short, Malawi got independence in 1964 from the British, who were a British colony, like this brother of mine. And Kamusbanda, we had a president called Kamusbanda who ruled Malawi for 30 years with so many dictatorial tendencies. People were kind of fed up, were tired, were yearning for freedom, because we were told that in other countries there are those freedoms. So we were yearning for this independence, democracy. So in 1992 we had a referendum. The majority won, so we had to change from dictatorship to the freedom. So a new political dispensation came in 1994. So we're kind of talking of first multi-party president, who was there from 1994 to 2004, a decade, because our terms are 5 years. But today, in so many circles, we talk of this as the lost decade. Yes, we're yearning for freedom, but then it was freedom without responsibility. So this president, again, who saw us getting out of the dictatorship, was trying to change the constitution so that he can have an open term. That failed. He tried again so that he could have the third term. That failed again. So people said, no, we'll proceed. But come 2019, there were some irregularities in the elections. You know, when we have these elections, I agree with these issues of democracy. When we have elections in a country, we have what we call observers. They will come from the EU, from SADC, from Africa Group. So at the end of the elections in 2019, almost all the observers said the elections were fair and peaceful. And yet there were irregularities. So the opposition went to court, and the opposition won the case, which is very strange in most countries that an opposition party wins a court case, but that happened. So we are in that time now, so we hope that things will go. Malawi remains a peaceful country. We haven't had wars, but the question would be, what keeps Malawi economically stagnant? Why is it that people are not happy? Because of their poverty. But I believe putting the blame on the colonial past won't do any of us any good. We just have to face the reality and ask ourselves, how do we address the realities that we have today? You know, one of the challenges we have on our continent is that when leaders are elected in two positions, you know, they have these five-year terms. So they are busy, once they go into government, they are busy to make sure that come 5 years, we will be elected. So all their planning, all their discussions, everything is seen in terms of 5 years, which is sad. And like most politicians, and most in bold and underlined, like most politicians all over the world, they so easily and so successfully forget that they will not be there forever. that the world is changing. And you still see them wanting to remain in power. But, well, time is ticking and they will go. And so they want to amass everything from themselves. They want to make sure that in the judiciary, there are people they have appointed so that come something, they will be defended. They will make sure that they will buy some of the MPs in parliament so that when there's an attempt to change the constitutions, they will be supported. But then, now when it comes for the good of the country, when it comes to cultural diplomacy, discussions on the world stage, these are the people who are engaged with other countries, with other groupings, to change the things of their country. Now, how do you expect that these people will bring something for the good of their country? And therefore, no wonder that in most countries, people are not happy, including my country. Now, as a solution, saying we can't go on and on and on, Malawi has introduced something, what we call Malawi 2063. We have chosen the 2063. Remember, I said we got independence in 1964. So by 2063 will be 100 years. By the way, our Independence Day is tomorrow, the 6th of July. Now, this document will not be changed by anybody who comes into the power. So whether you like it or not as president, you have to plan according to this document. And the other thing I like now is that the rule of law and governance. The Anti-Corruption Bureau has been empowered. Now, I'll give you an example. As my brother said, I'm a diplomat. So, but as a diplomat, it does not mean that you have to tell lies. You just have to communicate the way things are and not make a judgment. At the moment, we have former 3 cabinet ministers who are in prison. They had to answer charges of whatever they were doing in the past. At the moment I'm talking, our vice president is attending a court case. These are, I'm not a judge to say whether he was right or not, but these are examples of saying, okay, there should be a rule of law and governance, and these are the things that will encourage people. Now, looking at Malawi as a member in the global community, Malawi is being invaded. And the invader is killing innocent citizens. And the invader is destroying our infrastructure. And we know that there are so many nations making contributions to this invader, triggering the actions of this invader. I'll tell you who this invader is. I like the argument used by Germany when they appointed Jennifer Morgan as the special envoy on climate change, sitting in the foreign office. They argued or justified this by saying climate has become a security issue. Indeed, climate change and its effect is a security issue. The tropical cyclones, in our case, are here to stay. Climate change is invading our countries, killing hundreds of people each year, destroying infrastructure. And these cyclones are disturbing the economic fundamentals, making the economy unusable, unstable, and unattractive. So when I say we know of nations who are supporting this invader, you know what I mean now. So, for instance, the tropical cyclone Freddy and its consequences. Now, when we had this, so many people died. As an ambassador going around, I've been receiving letters of condolences because as ambassador here in Berlin, I'm also ambassador in several countries. So I've received letters of condolences and pledge for support. And here goes the diplomacy. Our stand as a country, not as Joseph, our stand at the UN, our decision based on the principles of territorial integrity, we said we didn't support the taking of the going into Ukraine. So when going around, whether it's in Czech Republic, president to say, oh, thank you for standing with us condemning Russia on the aggression. I say, well, standing with you. But you know that there's another invader who is invading Malawi. What are you doing? Because yes, you are saying, I'm not saying that we took that position for the sake of being nice to you, but because of our own understanding. And again, just to give you an example, last Monday, there was a panel discussion, and the moderator asked one of the European MPs, saying, some countries are saying, why is it so many billions are going to Ukraine, supporting Ukraine, and yet in other areas we have also wars, but we haven't seen this kind of support. There was an example of this, these so many people who die in a boat, and then we have our 5 friends with the whole world paying attention. So the good lady there said, no, you have to understand, the things are different here. Because we are supporting Ukraine, you know, the Ukrainians are in their country, they are trying to defend themselves, so we are seeing with our eyes. So deep down I said, well, I cannot contribute here because I went there I was invited as an ambassador there just to observe. But deep down I was saying, oh, madam, a simple and straightforward answer should have been, no, they are on our side. Or they are one of us. It's simple, they are one of us, and that's why we're trying to give more support. Because in terms of people dying, we are not happy with that, and we want the war to stop because we are affected as well. But I think there are issues of double standards, issues of being dishonest. So these are the issues that we have to see when we are talking of diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, so that we be honest. Now, at the continental level as Africa, allow me to mention a few things that are posing challenges in the cultural diplomacy in Africa and between Africa and the West. First, it is important to understand that the structure and organization of African unity is different from that of EU. I mean, in the case of Europe, the continent we are currently in. And also it's important to understand whether the West and other countries are coming to the continent of Africa with values, their values or their own interests, or both. And the other thing also to keep in mind is that the interests of France or the interests of the UK to some African countries are completely different from the interests of Germany or Norway, sometimes due to their colonial bonds, or also sometimes because of their specific interests. Now, how can we talk of Europe's foreign policy towards Africa and be surprised that it's failing? No, we shouldn't be surprised that it's failing. The other thing is Africa is vast. It has, 54 countries at different levels of economic development. You know as well that Europe too is just big. Now, to ask somebody to think that the Irish people are completely the same as the Germans, are completely the same as Hungarians, are completely the same. No, they are different, though in one continent. I remember as a student in Münster, I visited Oldenburg. I met a nice guy, very nice, and Deutsche. They are very good. So he innocently said, oh, some time back we had Herr Frank, I've just forgotten his second name, but he was famous, and he stayed with us for several years, but he was famous in his country. I don't know whether you know him, but he was speaking French. I said, well, in the SADC region, we have only English and Portuguese, and I remember Senegal. Excuse me, Malawi and Senegal are way, so it would be difficult for me to understand. The other thing we have as a challenge in Africa, this thing which was done here in Berlin, the partitioning of Africa. One day I was in Rome. At that time, I could speak Dutch and English. And there we met a friend from Mozambique. He could speak Portuguese and Italian. You know what? We had one gentleman from Brazil who was connecting us to understand, translating us. And so Malawi is Mozambique is our neighbor. So we needed somebody from Brazil to make us understand each other. So these are the things that are there on the continent. And then on the other side, we have little knowledge of what's happening in Africa. Most people were surprised by developments on the continent when conflict broke out in Ethiopia. It caught many by surprise. When African countries abstained from the resolution on Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, people were surprised. People ought to stop being surprised and try to understand. And this is also your field of cultural diplomacy. I will give you an example, which I personally, and not me only, many people from the continent look at it as a dangerous memory. You know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, when it came to the issue of vaccines, most of countries in the Western world had plenty, more than needed vaccines, but were not ready to share them with many countries in the South when they were most needed. I know of some countries that were ready to manufacture vaccines, but when they went to WTO, they were told that the big giants, the pharmaceutical industries of the Northern Hemisphere, refused. And these were times when we were asking ourselves, are profits more important than the lives of people in the South? These are dangerous memories that cannot leave my mind when I go and sit down and start discussing with somebody on issues of diplomacy from any angle. And now the African leaders are asking questions. And I represent the African leaders, not all African leaders, at least my leader. The question is the West being driven by interests or values, or are their interests defined by crisis? You know, today when we go to meetings, there will be green hydrogen, green hydrogen, green hydrogen. And so many billions of dollars are being invested in some countries in Africa. Now, this focus on green hydrogen has come in the face of the war. And we see that there's a certain focus on Africa defined by actions of other foreign actors, as in the case of, I'm pretty sure that you have heard of the Global Gateway Fund. You know, it's not a hidden thing. The Global Gateway Fund has come to counter Chinese road network initiative in Africa. Now, is it out of values or out of interest? And there is a latest deal with some North African country with the main interest to stop migration, even if that government has been suppressing democratic values. Now, there are countries that are not given any support because they are not following the democratic values. Others will be given vast support, though they are not, but because there is something good for us. I have, in the interest of time, I will skip some of these examples. You know, this thing that President of Kenyatta, President Ruto, is saying these days, we have this China-Africa summit. Then we have Turkey-Africa summit. And then we have Russia-Africa summit. And then there will be called for the USA-Africa summit. And then there will be called for the EU-Africa summit. And there we have a bunch, sorry not to use the word, a group of 54 leaders to meet one person. And as Ruto says, and these people are given, these presidents are given 1.5 minutes, 1.5 minutes, 1.5 minutes, 1.5 minutes. You have to discuss whether this is the right way to call cultural diplomacy and on a way of respecting each other. So there are so many examples, but no, the questions we now have as Africans, we are saying old answers are no longer relevant to the new questions that we have today. And there is need for radical cooperation. Like many of us here, I've been saddened, disappointed, nauseated, angered, shocked, fed up, and frustrated, and sometimes all in one day. But what has this meant for me, for my faith in the future, faith in my job, hope for my country, or hope for my continent? There are so many scholars here. The great 17th century scientist and scientific genius, Galileo. You know Galileo, yeah? He was imprisoned by the church, and that time the Catholic Church was a mighty. So he was imprisoned by the church for his belief that the planet revolves around the sun. So there were great congregations, the Dominicans, the Jesuits, the whole hierarchy, even the Pope himself, all landed on him like a ton of bricks, telling him that his views were heretical and that they were contrary to the sacred scriptures. Sacred scriptures. Galileo was, of course, correct. The rest of them were all wrong. Right up to the end of his great scholarly life, he was tormented physically and mentally by a self-righteous church, which was so wrong that the embarrassment of it can still make us cringe 300 years after. And this story should have nothing else but make us humble and maybe even a little courageous about some of the present debates which are going on. History has itself changed courses many times, and as the ambassador said here, there were once mighty empires and their great leaders that are no longer there today. The world is changing, and the conversation must go on. Casual diplomacy, your field you are dealing with, will always be the best vehicle for this conversation. But it should be a conversation that is devoid of double standards, a conversation that is honest. Thank you.